name is Jenny, and my first novel, Lindorm, is coming out on April 13th. Lindorm is a retelling of the Danish folktale King Lindorm, and as part of my writing process, I did my own translation of the original Danish text. It's probably not the best translation. My Danish is admittedly a little shaky, but it is the translation that I know I have the rights to without doing a lot of complicated research on copyright laws, so it's the one I'm going to share with you today. King Lindorm was originally published by Sven Grundtvig in Gamle Dansk Minder I Folkemunde. It was recorded by Grundtvig's adjunct A. Levinson, who heard it from Maren Mathesdottir in 1854. So, here it is. I'm going to be reading it, so I won't be doing a good job looking at the camera. Whatever, it's fine. Once there was a king who had so lovely a queen. At last they had a wedding, and when they went to bed the first night, there was nothing written on their wedding sheets. But when they stood up, it stood there written that they should have no children together. The king hereover was highly grieved, but the queen more. She shook. It was so hard that they should have no heir to their kingdom. One day she went out in deep thought and came to a remote place. There she met an old woman who asked if she would tell her what was wrong. The queen looked up and answered, "Now I cannot help anything to tell you. This is a thing you cannot help me in." "Now, it might even happen that I could," said the old woman, and asked if she would only say what was wrong. Yes, she could easily say it, and she told her how it stood written on the bed of their wedding night that they should have no children, and it was for that she was now so sad. She could give her counsel, though," said the old woman, "then she might have children. In the evening, as the sun went down, she should take a robes, which is a drinking cup with two handles, and leave it in the northwest corner of the garden. In the morning, when the sun rose up, she should take it up again. Then there would stand 2 roses under it, one red and one white. Should she take the red and eat it, then it would be a boy. Should she take the white, then it would be a girl, but she must not take them both." The queen came home and did as the old woman had said. In the morning, the sun rose up, and so she went into the garden and took the robes up, and there stood 2 roses, one red and one white. Now she knew not which one she should take and eat. If she took the red and it was a boy, then he might go to war and be defeated, and so she might as well have had no children. She thought she would take the white, so it would be a girl, and then she could stay home with them until she was married and went to another kingdom. So she took the white and ate it. It tasted so very good that she took the red and ate it too. She thought to herself, so she would have twins, and did not think any farther. Now it came to pass that the king was at war, and when the queen noticed that she was with child, she wrote to him and let him know, moreover he was much pleased. And now it was in the fullness of time that she should give birth to a Lindorm. As soon as he was born, he dug himself under the bed in her chamber, and there he had his home. There he stayed, and a letter came from the king, saying that he would be home in a short time. And the time came for the king to come home, and he was driving his carriage up to the palace, and the queen went out to receive him, and the Lindorm also went out to greet the king. He jumped up beside the coach and said, "Welcome home, father." "What?" said the king. "Am I your father?" "Yes, if you do not wish to be my father, I shall split both you and the castle apart." So he had to accept it after all. They went in, and the queen had to make her explanation of what had come to pass with the old woman and herself. A few days later, the whole council and all the nobles were summoned and welcomed the king home and celebrated his victory over all his enemies. The Lindorm came also and said, "Now I will be married, father." "Yes, and who do you think will have you?" said the king. "If you do not get me a wife, whether young or old, whether big or small, whether rich or poor, then I shall split both you and the castle apart." The king wrote out to all the kingdoms if any would have the king's son. So there came so very lovely a princess. It seemed so strange to her that she should never look to see who she would have, until she should enter the hall they would be married in. Then came the Lindorm and stood at her side. The wedding day was over, and they went into the room with each other. As soon as he came in with her, he split her apart. There it was, and it was the king's birthday some time after. When they all sat at the table, the Lindorm came again and said, "Now I will be married, father." The king said, "Who do you think will have you now? If you do not get me a wife, whether young or old, whether big or small, whether rich or poor, I shall split both you and the castle apart." The king wrote to many kingdoms to ask if any would have the king's son. There came again so very lovely a princess from afar. She did not see the groom until she came into the hall they were married in. Then came the Lindorm and stood at her side. But when the wedding day was over and they came into the room with each other, the Lindorm split her apart also. Some time after that, it was the queen's birthday. Then the Lindorm came in. He came to sit at the table, and again he said, "Now I will be married, father." "Now I cannot give you more wives," said the king. "Now 2 mighty kings make war against me, whose daughters I have given you for wives, and what shall I do with them? Let them come. As long as you have me, they must come, even if there are 10. But if you do not get me a wife, whether young or old, whether big or small, whether rich or poor, so shall I split both you and the castle apart." The king was made to promise it, but he was much distressed. There was now an old man who was a shepherd for the king. He had a small house in the woods, and he also had a daughter. The king went out to him and said, "Listen, good man, will you not let me wed your daughter to my son?" "Oh no, that I cannot do, for I have only 1 child to support me in my old age. For another thing, if he will not spare so lovely a princess, so he will not spare my daughter, so I think it is a sin." But the king would have her, and the old man was made to give his consent. The old shepherd went home and told this to his daughter. She was very sad and went through the woods in deep thought. As she went, there came an old woman also through the woods, and she would pluck berries and apples. She was in a blue skirt and a red vest. "What is it that you are so sad for?" she said. "I can easily have reason to be sad, but it cannot help to tell you this, for it is not something you can help me in." "Oh, it might even happen," said the old woman, "if only you will tell me." "Yes, it is such. I must have the king's son, and it is a Lindorm. He has split 2 princesses apart, and now I know that he will also split me apart." "Oh, there could well be a solution to this, if you will obey me," said the old woman. Yes, she would obey her. "Now when you have stood before the priest with him, and you know you will enter the chamber, then you shall wear 10 gowns, and if you do not have them, then you must borrow them. Then you must demand a tub full of lye and a tub full of sweet milk, and as many whips as a fellow can carry in his arms, and these must be put into the chamber. As soon as the Lindorm gets there, he will say, 'Fair maiden, cast off a gown.' Then you shall say, 'King Lindorm, cast off a skin.' So he shall say such to you and you to him, until you get to the 9th gown and him to the 9th skin. Then he will have no more, but you shall be in 1 gown. Then you must take hold of him when he is nothing but a hunk of bloody flesh. Then you shall dip the whips in the lye and whip him as long as you think he can bear it. Then you shall put him in the sweet milk after, and then you shall wrap him up in the 9 gowns and lay him in your arms. And then you shall go to sleep, if only for a little while." She thanked her for the good advice, but she was afraid nonetheless. It was a great risk to take with so cruel a beast. The wedding day came, and there came a coach so big and so magnificent. There were 2 ladies in it who were to dress her as the most beautiful bride. She came up through the king's guard and into the hall. The Lindorm came in and stood behind her, and they were married. It was drawing to night, and they were going to the bridal bed. So she demanded a tub full of lye and a tub full of sweet milk, and whips there. The men did laugh at it. It was peasant nonsense and fancies. But the king said what she asked for she should have, and so she did. Before she went into the chamber, she put on the 9 gowns, as well as the one she was in. Then they came into the chamber, and the Lindorm said, "Fair maiden, cast off a gown." So she said, "King Lindorm, cast off a skin." And so it was, until she came to the 9th gown, and he to the 9th skin. And then she grasped the whips, for by then he lay on the ground and could hardly move, and the blood ran from him. So she took the whips and dipped them in lye and whipped him as strongly as she could, and for so long, so there were bits and pieces stuck to the whips. So she bathed him in the sweet milk, and she wrapped him in the 9 gowns. And so she went to bed and took him in her arms. At last she fell asleep, but it was late. When she woke again, she lay in the arms of a beautiful prince. Morning came, and no one dared to look in the bridal door, for they were afraid it was with her as with the others. Then the king wanted to go and look inside. This time, as he opened the bridal door, she said, "Come right in, all is well here." He came in and was so glad. He fetched the queen and all the others, and there was such a celebration over the wedding bed. They got up and came into another chamber and got dressed, for their chamber looked bad. Then the wedding was held again with joy and pleasure, and the king and queen held her so dear they never knew the good they would do her, because she had saved their son. The end.